Hello, everyone. I'm Bron Williams, the bias specialist, coming to you from Australia. And with me today is Abiola Soremekun, who's a certified John Maxwell trainer, speaker and coach, and a relationship counsellor and therapist. And she's in Nigeria. Welcome, Abiola.
Thank you, Bron. Thank you. Nice to be with you here. Thank you, Bron.
I love being able to speak across the world the way we do.
Yes.
And although we have hugely different backgrounds, grown up in different cultures, there are ways in which we connect. And the thing that I believe connects us the most is that we both are women of passion.
Yes, Bron. I agree with you on that.
You have a passion for purpose, and I'm going to be talking to you about that. I have a passion for bias, and you're going to be talking to me about that.
Oh, yes. Yes, Bron. I call you the bias specialist.
That's right. And it's so important when you've got, and I want to be able to draw these things out from you, because you can have a passion about things, but when you layer it with purpose, it goes to a whole nother level, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, you're right. Yes. I mean, when people ask me what passion is, I just tell them in very simple language. Passion is what you love, just what you love to do. And then about purpose, purpose is the why of existence. I believe everyone has a gift, a purpose, something to give to mankind, to humanity. So that's what purpose is all about. And then in the context of purpose, I always say, there are three kinds of people in the world. There are the people who are living a purpose-driven life, the people who are yet to discover their purpose, and those who have already discovered their purpose but have limiting beliefs, really. You know, and someone once said that the two most important days in your life is the day you were born and the day you discover your purpose. Well, I want to agree with that person. I can't actually remember the person that said it, but I want to agree with that person.
And I love that, because that there is no time frame for that second important day. For some people, they discover their purpose fairly early on in life. But for others, it doesn't become clear until later in life. And maybe for someone like me, I think I've had a purpose my entire life, but it has changed shape. How it's been expressed has changed shape over time. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about having a purpose. So can you tell me a bit more about what's your purpose? You've got a passion. Tell me about Abiola's purpose in life.
Oh, yes, I have a passion. I mean, I always, in some places where I've had to tell the story, I mean, I think I've also shared it on social media. I grew up watching my mother teach. I wasn't up to school late by that time, but I insisted on going with my mother to school. So she didn't have a choice but to take me to school. So she had a desk for me just right in front of our desk. So I grew up watching my mother teach. And then I grew up also knowing the power of knowledge. And so when it was time to go into university, really, I thought I was just going to go into teaching. But my mother, surprisingly, didn't want me to be a teacher. She wanted me to be a doctor. I mean, you can imagine that. So I made attempts to, study medicine in university. So when it didn't work, I went up into the sciences and all that. But I've always kept my passion with me. I mean, my passion has always been to impart knowledge to people, because there's a difference between the known and the do not know. And then, Bron, I also grew up, hearing people say, what you don't know won't hurt you. But I always tell people that care to listen that what you don't know will not only hurt you, it may harm you. So you need to know. So knowledge for me is power. Yeah.
You're quite right. It's interesting that you say there's like the difference between the known and the unknown, and that's part of my purpose. You can see there that I've got a tagline of making bias conscious, and we'll talk a bit more about bias, but bias generally sits below the surface of our conscious thought, and my purpose is to bring that up to the surface so that the unknown becomes known, then we can deal with it.
Yes. For me, in talking about purpose, I mean, bias, of course, you know, like, for instance, when I ask, why are people not living their purpose? What is the reason why people are not living their purpose? One, it's because they're biased.
Unpack that for me.
Oh, yeah. They're biased either by their gender, either by their race, by their looks, by their background, educational, society, whatever. So people are actually biased, and that's why I'm so much interested in your bias, because I would like you to tell us a lot about bias. But before we go into that, I want to tell you, let me just say that I want people to know about 4 benefits. I'm not going to share everything because I'm having a discovery session by the end of the month, actually on March 30th. But I just want to share with people listening maybe 4 of the benefits of you knowing, living a purpose-driven life.
Excellent.
Yeah. 1, it helps you stay focused. Living a purpose-driven life is like you want to go on a journey, Bron. You enter your car, you already know where you're going.
Yes.
So you can always tell that, okay, maybe I need this amount of funds. So, living a purpose-driven life makes you stay focused. You know where you're going.
It does.
There are no distractions.
Yes.
And 2, it makes you passionate about your goal. Makes you passionate. I'm not saying you're not going to have, issues or challenges along the way, but you are passionate. Because you are passionate about your purpose, that passion is a driving force.
It is, yes.
Then knowing your purpose also gives you clarity about everything. So clarity in the decisions you make, clarity in everything that you do. And then the 4th thing, like I said, I'm not going to share all of those points because I don't want to give all the way. It's you live longer. Why people would say, I always tell them about the Ikigai story. The Ikigai story is a Japanese word. Ikigai means purpose in Japanese. In 2017, there was an experiment in Japan when a group of researchers, they observed that in a certain part of Japan, they had a lot of old people 90 in their hundreds, and they were wondering why. Those people, and not only were they old, they were also healthy, they were happy people. So they started the research, and they found out that these people were doing things they love. So what does it mean, Bron?
Makes sense.
Living a purpose-driven life gives you longevity. You're happy doing what you love.
Yeah, and I think I loved what you were saying. It was so interesting when you talked about your background in education and this desire to impart knowledge, because I have an education background. I was an educator for about 30 years. And that desire to help people understand the things that they don't yet know is a wonderful thing. And I think what I've taken is that I think when we come to purpose, I've coupled that desire that I have, because I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was 8 years old. So that was that was my purpose as an 8-year-old. Is I wanted to grow up and be a teacher. But another thing that I discovered in my teens was I had a very strong streak towards justice. I did not like seeing injustice. And I think what I've been able to do now, and this is where I think our purpose, it's there, but it takes different forms over our lifetime. For me, I now combine those two because I want I talk to people about our biases because I want them to know. But also I know, as you rightly said, people don't follow their purpose because of bias, because things like sexism, other things with gender, race, age, skin color, all of those biases get in the way.
Absolutely.
But they're at the basis of all the injustice that we see in the world. So there's a sense in which I've brought both of those aspects of my purpose together in
That's
the work,
absolutely wonderful.
that I do now.
Wonderful. Yeah, and one of the reasons why I like this session that we're having is I would like you to also help me talk about bias, so that people can actually know what is actually bias and what is how can you make it conscious. But before we go into that, I want to share a story about bias.
Yes,
there's
please.
the story of this. There's a story of this lady that really inspires me. She was a guest speaker at the last year's John Maxwell August IMC International Maxwell Conference. Her name is Jamie Kenlima. She was the first female CEO of a brand in L'Oreal in the 100 years of history of L'Oreal. The first female CEO. But it didn't just happen overnight. She went from a struggling waitress to a TV personality. But because she had she had problems with using makeup on her skin. So she was inspired to do her own makeup. So she started it from her living room. But she had a lot of self-doubt. She had a lot of body doubt. And then people actually told her that people will not buy makeup from somebody with a body like hers because she doesn't have it, in the beauty industry. You
doesn't have the model shape.
Slim, she doesn't have the normal shape. She wasn't that tall. She was a bit how should I say without actually being rude? Okay, not the slim type, but she was
she had a more solid figure.
A more solid figure. Thank you. Thank you, bro. So she was faced with self-doubt, body doubt, but she refused to be underestimated. She started cosmetics in her living room, and she went on to become the first female CEO in L'Oreal Cosmetics. She actually sold her cosmetics, IT cosmetics, for $1 billion.
Wow.
Did you hear that, Bron?
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I even like calling it. $1 billion. It's like maybe the more I call it, maybe the more it come to me. So, I was really inspired by this lady. She could have given up. Self-doubt, body doubt, a lot of things against her, but she persisted. So this is what, to me, bias is all about. But, Bron, I want you to tell us more, because I know bias is one of the things that make people not to actually live purpose-driven lives. There's so many people out there who want to do things, but they feel biased, either by their educational background, by their body shape, by their looks, by their race, by their gender. So I want you to throw more light on bias so that people can actually know how you can make your bias conscious and how you can make it work for you. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, look, thank you. They're great questions, Abiola. So if I go back to what bias is, quite simply, it's part of the way that we think, all human beings, regardless of our skin colour, our race, our age, our religion, it doesn't matter. All people have biases. I don't think we're born biased, but we develop them because it's part of our thinking process. And our biases develop because we receive messages, and it's particularly those early messages. We know that
right from our childhood days.
Yes,
right from
those first 7 years of a child's life are so important.
Amazing.
Now, one of my goals is to take away any guilt or shame around bias, because as I'm a parent, my sons are grown, they have children of their own. Now, I don't believe there are many of us who actually deliberately instill biases in our children that we think will hurt them. But it's the unconscious messaging that we've received that we pass on to our children. that shape the way that we look at the world and the relationships we have. It's bias, in a sense, privileges one set of ideas or a group of people over and above another group, and often to the detriment of that other group. And that results in the things that you're talking about, where, you know, you're talking about that woman who had the solid body. She didn't have the slim body. Now, certainly in the Western media, that, you know, tall, slim, thin model shape is held up as the female ideal. But back in, you know, the Victorian era, women wore bustles, you know, at the back, because a big bottom was the somehow the female
beauty. Can you imagine how time has evolved?
And then if you go even further back, like thousands of years, to very early days, where very well-rounded female figures were seen as gods, as, you know, as a sign of fertility. And, you know, so those of us who have those more rounded figures now, we would have been beautiful back in the day. It's
For
all
me,
about,
I mean, I have a round figure, and of course, but I'm proud of what I have. But really, how would someone, I mean, allow their body, the way they look, to actually, I mean, or rather, maybe their gender, to actually stop them from what they want to become? It's amazing. I mean, and like I always tell people, you are the only one that can stop yourself from achieving your dream, your goals, your purpose, your passion. If you say no, then it's no. But the moment you break away from that bias, this is what I think, Bron. Because the moment you break away from that bias, you're free. For me, I don't know, Bron, but I'm a science student. I know there's a fact. I know when they say something is a fact, it's proven. And even facts that have been proven, I mean, can still be, I mean, they can still carry out an experiment on something that's been proven and then still get something else. So for me, bias, I don't think bias has been proven. It doesn't have any, I mean, tell us more, Bron.
So the issue with bias is that it's unconscious. It sits below the level of our conscious thought. Roger J. Davies has described bias as sitting in a parallel world to rational and logical thought. So you've got your biases sitting here that are generally judgmental, they're unconscious and they're instinctive, and then you've got your rational and logical thought sitting here, which is, you know, as Daniel Kahneman said, that's your slow thinking, where you're taking some time to think through issues. The problem for us as human beings is that, like, our biases can be helpful because they allow us to make snap judgments, and sometimes we need to. You know, we need to know that, you know, something is safe or someone is safe or we can trust people. But unfortunately, our brains are wired in such a way that we develop neural pathways where if we've been given information in the past that has led to a particular place, like take, for instance, in my background, growing up in a very white part of Sydney, Australia, where I didn't mix with anybody who didn't look like me, sound like me, go to church like me, you know, all of that sort of thing. When I was confronted with a lot of, when I worked with asylum seekers on Nauru, I'm confronted with hundreds of people who had black and brown skin. Now, my body started to react to that, you know, the stomach's churning, the shoulders are tensing. And I realised that somewhere, because I'd had this really monochromatic upbringing, and had never been exposed to huge differences like that, somewhere along the line I had learnt, and this won't be that my parents deliberately told me that people with dark skin were not to be trusted or were bad people, but somewhere along the line I learnt that difference was a threat. And so I felt afraid. And I've had to unpack that and turn that on its head to where now I see difference as an asset. You know, I'm talking to you across the world and I'm learning from you.
That's awesome, Bron. Yeah.
But see, I never questioned those ways of thinking because that was just my normal, you know, what I had been doing all my life. And like I was in my mid-50s when this was going on. So I'd had 5 and a bit decades of thinking this.
Wow.
Mid-50s. So it's all of those little biases were sitting there underneath the surface that I was unaware of until I was placed in a situation that was very, very different. And I had to face that. So, you know, like our biases are just there and we don't question them. But not everybody, and I think this is actually sometimes is quite a confronting thing, we don't always want to be pushed into our comfort zone, out of our comfort zone. But I think that for all of us, if we want to start to identify what our biases are, because bias gets in the way, you know, it stops us relating with people. It can actually limit our decision-making because we only choose. This I found really interesting as I've been doing some research. Janet Yellen, who had a very senior role in economics in the US during just after the GFC, she said there was because all the economists who were particularly at work in the US at that stage, they all had gone to the same schools, done the same training, and they were all mostly white men. It was like they were in this loop. And the fact that there wasn't any diversity of thought around the economy and the finances at that time, that actually contributed to the GFC because nobody was bringing a fresh perspective in. And when I read that, I thought, how amazing is that? And that's the problem with bias, is it limits us to a particular way of thinking.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So,
which comes back to what you were saying about our limiting beliefs.
Actually, how?
Well, if bias limits our outlook and the things that we want to, the messages that we receive, it then that outlook becomes part of our beliefs, our belief systems, where, you know, one of the other things I discovered, started on the track of understanding about white privilege was, you know, I was watching how the white expats on Nauru in the different centres were talking to the Nauruans. Now, they're Pacific Islanders. They live on this little tiny island. And this is myself included, this sense of superiority. You know, it was like, well, hello, I'm from Australia, developed country, university educated. Of course I know better than someone who lives in a little tiny island and probably has never been offered. So it was this, you know, my ideas not only were limiting me, but they were limiting the people that I was working for. And I had to come to grips with that as well. So our biases can limit ourselves. I'm too old. I'm too young. Women don't, women should. Young men can't. You know, what my accent is, you know, all of those sorts of things. We limit ourselves, but we also limit other people by saying, you know, like that woman that you spoke about. She couldn't possibly sell makeup. She doesn't have the right body shape. You know, what does she know? She's just a waitress from wherever. So, you know, they fuel our expectations of ourselves and of others. And if we allow them to go unchallenged, that's when we have our limiting beliefs grow. And, you know, just as you do in your work, you help people see what their beliefs are and then rewrite them. So they tell themselves something different.
Rewriting your story, you know, I have a series on that, rewriting your story. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Bron. Thank you so much. You know, just talking about this bias thing. I mean, when you said women shouldn't, it reminded me of an incident that happened, but of course I worked in the energy sector. So I remember there was one time I needed to go on a field trip, and my boss said, no, I couldn't. I said, why? He said, because you're a woman. I said, why? I worked in the male-dominated industry. It doesn't matter. Everyone is called a gentleman, whether you're a lady or not. I said, I needed to do it. He said, okay, no problem. So what did I do? Because I was afraid that if I go on the high sea, you know, people usually get seasick and all that, that I wouldn't be able to survive it. 3 days on the high sea, you know, going for a sample gathering experiment or something like that. So what did I do? I prepared myself. I did all that I had to do. And I went. And I was able to do it. 3 days. I was standing on my feet. Well, guess what, Bron? He who thought that I wouldn't be able to do it was the one that was not able to do it. It was flat on his back throughout that time. So really, to tell anyone that cares to listen, you are the only one that can limit yourself. And now, I mean, Bron has told us how you can, I mean, make your bias conscious of your bias, and then, you know, don't let it limit you. Agree. Just know. I'm right, Bron. Am I right, Bron? I mean,
yes.
Make the unconscious conscious. Hug your bias, but do not let it limit you. Is that what you're saying, Bron? Did I say it right?
Yeah, there's two parts to that, and I'm glad you brought those two things out there, Abiola. Okay. Because first of all, it's about making bias conscious, and people often ask me, well, how do you do that? If, you know, we're talking about things that are sitting at the unconscious level. And I say people, you can use a 4-step process. The first is to notice the triggers. Now, for me on Nauru, the trigger was actually a physical one. My stomach's churning, my shoulders are tensing. I was in an uncomfortable situation. Wow. Other times, if it's, say, in the workplace, it can also be a physical one. You know, I think particularly women, we get that gut reaction, but men do too. We have a gut reaction to people. And that's an indicator that there is something in ourselves that is being challenged. So it's important to listen to that. But also it can be emotional, where somebody we always get angry around them. We're always frustrated. So notice your triggers. Don't just dismiss them as, they're not important. Notice your triggers. The second thing is then to ask questions. Well, why am I feeling like that? Why do I always feel this way around this person?
Yeah, deep question.
Do some reflection. The third thing is then to go, because once we've done some reflection, we'll probably have come up with an answer. You know, that's the purpose of questions, is to find an answer. Once we've got that answer, it's then about thinking again. We do a bit more reflection, because it's about, okay, what are the stories that I've been told or I've been telling myself in this area, you know, whether it's about capacity, ability, anything. What are the stories I've been telling myself? And then, then you can actually name the bias and decide what you want to do with it. And if I just walk through that step with my own journey on Nauru, I had a physical trigger, stomach churning, shoulders tension. I then asked the question, well, why, Bron? For goodness sake, like as I said, I was in my mid-50s. I wasn't some inexperienced, sweet young thing. I'd had a bit of life experience. So it was like, well, why now? And then, and that gave me the question of somewhere along the line, this is the story. I'd had a story in my head that difference was a threat. And so I realised that, and because it was around people who are different skin colour and different races, I had to make a difficult, come to that difficult point myself to recognise that that was racist. I didn't mean to be, didn't want to be, but that was the truth. But then I could change the story. Once I've recognized that, go from seeing difference as a threat to difference as an asset. And that's why I use this term, hug your biases, because it's important to see our biases. While our biases can have negative connotations and negative consequences, and we see that around the world, we see it in our workplaces, we see it in families.
Yes, everywhere in the world.
But it's also a data point. I now knew something about myself that I didn't know before. And once you've got that data point, you hang on to that. That's why I say hug your biases. It's not about just continuing to be biased in a way that's unhelpful, but it's about hold them close, know what they are, own them. Ask questions, because see, the thing is now, because I've owned my biases of white privilege and racism, I don't have to feel guilt and shame around that. I just know that this is a reality in my life and I need to continually work with it. And if other people want to point the finger, all I go is, yes, I know, and I'm working on it. So I think that's where hugging your biases close, owning them and saying, look, this is part of my life. It's part of my growing up. And I think that's where we not break the bias as such, but we break the power of the bias, because that my brain is always going to go instinctively along a particular pathway. Because, I've had those messages in my head now for over 60 years, but I do get to interrupt that thought when, if I see my thinking going off one line, because I'm now aware, I can make a choice. So that's where we break the power of the bias.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I've learned a lot today. I'm actually going to do some of the points I've gleaned from this bias, making bias unconscious in my session. I'm having a Zoom section on March 30th on a Wednesday from 4 p.m. to just another session, 4 to 5 p.m. on purpose and passion. I'm very passionate about people finding their purpose because of the benefits involved. Like I told you, there are many benefits, more than the 4 that I mentioned. I don't want to let the cat too much out of the bag. If you're interested in hearing more, if you're living a purpose-driven life, congratulations. If you need to find out what your purpose is, come and attend my session. And if you find out what your purpose is and you still need to connect to start to live your purpose, or maybe you know what your passion is, you want to connect your passion to your purpose, come for the session. You'll learn a lot. So thank you so much, Bron. I've actually learned so much about that.
I love these conversations, Abiola, because I think as you have asked me questions, you talk about clarity and focus. And I think each time we talk about things, talk out our own things, we do get that greater clarity. And so I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I will include the link to your workshop on the 30th of March, so that's West African time. We'll include that link so that people who would like to just take another step along living a life of purpose, that they will be able to do that. So thank you, Abiola. It has been an absolute delight talking with you today.
Thank you, and see you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night. It's morning in your in your part of the world. So have a good day.
Okay.
And good night to me. Thank you.
Thank you.